And we also have Mr. Izzat Dajani, who is the CEO of IMCapital Partners. He has over 25 years of experience in investment management, corporate advisory, strategic government initiatives. He is the chief executive, as I say, of Dubai-based IMCapital Partners. And in the past, he's been chairman and CEO of Citibank in Qatar. He's been head of key clients at Goldman Sachs in its Dubai-based investment management division. He was appointed a foreign policy advisor to the Prime Minister of Kosovo, and he has also been providing advice to the Prime Minister of Albania. And he is the Executive Vice Chairman of Capital Compass. Now, Dr. Izzat Dajani, when you're speaking to clients, potential investors in the region, how do you generally describe the business and banking environment in some of the key Balkan countries?
Thank you. Thank you also to Walid Bek for inviting me here. When we discussed the opportunity to speak about the Balkans, Western Balkans, I thought it's an opportune moment because the Western Balkans provide a good story for great opportunities and lost opportunities. You know, those countries are unique in that sense. I was introduced to the Western Balkans because of my past experience heading and starting the investment office of the government of RFC in the United Arab Emirates, where we grew a zero asset base sovereign wealth fund from zero to about $16 billion. And that triggered the intro into the Balkans. Now, as my colleague said, you know, the Balkans are ex-Yugoslavia plus Albania, so you have, you know, six countries roughly. Banking is very small, very traditional. I worked predominantly in Serbia and in Kosovo. Sorry, in Kosovo and Albania. Kosovo has 10 banks, Albania 12 banks. Total asset of the banking asset in Kosovo is about $5.6 billion. Albania about 14. So really are small. You know, the whole banks are the size of one bank. But the returns are good. So banks are very profitable. But it's very traditional banking. And the sad part that, you know, the diaspora community of those countries are by far wealthier and more affluent than the people living inside the country. So like, let's say Albania is, Kosovo is 1.8 million people. You have in the diaspora about 800 million people living in Switzerland, in Germany, and the United States. Albania is about 2.8 million people, and out of, you know, and you have about 1.4 million living in Greece and in Italy. And those are affluent. So today, you have traditional banking trying to work as classical banks, yeah? And it's the story always of business and banking. Which one influences the other? Both start with letter B, ironically. But banking has the A after the B. So probably banking is more of a precursor for business than just business itself. Although both need each other. Today, if you are an overseas Kosovar or Albanian, and you want to have a role in your economy, there are no channels whatsoever to channel that capital into the economy. There are no investment banks. I mean, I spoke to both governors and said, you know, it's time to start thinking of capital markets, start thinking of, you know, having at least an investment bank whereby you can create the products for overseas Albanians, overseas Kosovars to really channel those funds away from just simply buying a piece of land or buying a piece of real estate. That's all what they do. So in my opinion, you know, there are incredible opportunities that are all missed. You know, these are countries sitting at the border of Europe. If you look at Kosovo, the currency is euro, so you have no currency risk. The population is highly educated. They're bilingual. They speak, you know, fluent English and fluent German sometimes. Educated, good IT infrastructure, but the return on investment, frankly, is zero. And sometimes you wonder why, and we can come to that I don't want to take your time on divulging further. But I think there are immense opportunities because of proximity to Europe, you know, the kind of the motivation within the country, right rules and regulations in place, but the all the good intentions are not creating the good policies for moving forward.
I think we now understand the challenges. Let's look at some opportunities, and let's also look at some success stories. Dr. Dajani, can you identify some successful initiatives that you've seen in the region in terms of regulation or product development or other areas of banking?
Thank you. I can actually name for you two stark examples, Montenegro and Albania. Montenegro is a rough terrain, small coastline, good location, but totally unmatched to the Albanian coastline and location. There is no comparison. And today you look at the economic development in both countries. Luckily for Albania today, they have a very strong government. It's not a coalition, so I think they will do things faster. But when I went to Montenegro, I was astounded by the amount of projects that they managed to materialize, not just talk about. In Albania, they came up with a very interesting strategic initiative. They wanted to kind of emulate what was going on in Montenegro. So there is something called strategic investment law, which I think is a great law. And basically, it allows investors who invest more than 50 million euro in a project to have access to government land at a nominal value of €1. So you can really get a coastline land, prime location, from the government by just simply paying €1. And they give you a 20-year lease initially, and then once you complete the project, they give you an additional 79-year lease. So you end up having 99-year lease for €1. Yeah? On top of that, they added tax incentives, income tax breaks for 10 years, exemption from excise duty and customs duty, and reduced the VAT from 18% to 8%. So I was with the Prime Minister in Drama, and he said, we're doing all this, but we're not getting a single investor. Why? Yeah. So see, the mistake that people make sometimes, they think that the odd project creates a strategy, which it doesn't. And the coastline of Albania is 430 kilometers. I mean, it's a massive pristine coastline, sitting on 2 seas. If I tell you there is not one single branded hotel on the entire coastline, not one. While you go to Albania next door, and the lifestyle is unbelievable. So I explained that, the incentives alone are great, but you need 2 things. One is the mechanism to make things happen, which was lacking. And secondly, things should be cohesive. Building a hotel is not tourism strategy. Building a hotel is real estate. But often the mistake that is made is like we build a hotel and we get tourists. No, you're not going to get tourists. You're going to get maybe local tourists. I mean, I can give you an example which is very directly relevant to this. Because, these are, you asked me about what are the real initiatives. I mean, this is a real initiative. I was asked to consult to a minister of tourism in another country. I will not mention it for confidentiality. It's a lady. She told me the head of state has put tourism as a key priority, strategic priority. I said, okay. And she said, we were asked to create a strategic committee for tourism. And we did, which was composed of 3 persons. The Minister of Tourism, the Minister of Interior, and the Minister of Health, because the country had some good health care that can be transported or used regionally. She said, we set up a committee. I said, fine. And she said, we discovered that nothing was going forward. Despite all the goodwill, head of state is pushing us, blah, blah, all this. I said, because my mission is to really open up the country, bring in the tour operators, excite people to come see the touristic attractions, create the environment for a hospitable environment. Next to me sits the Minister of Interior. His role is to close the country, stop the visas, forbid many countries from coming into the country, and next to him the Minister of Health, who is totally redundant. So I said, obviously you're not going to get you cannot move on this. And the chairperson was the Minister of Health. So what I'm trying to say here, that basically good intentions don't always make good policies. But countries that have the opportunity to make a difference, they need to walk that path. Yeah. And probably there are some stark examples, like if you look at the Dubai story. I mean, Dubai story is incredible. The way the country transformed itself, city, not even country, transformed itself in the last 20 years, from a $15-20 billion economy. Today, the GDP of Dubai is 102 billion, just Dubai. How they've done that through creating the right initiatives and the right environments. And I was actually, in my role as advisor to Prime Minister, I explained how that works and how that happens. Yeah.
Dr. Dajani, final words. You're giving advice to Prime Ministers. What should we be looking out for as the signs that things are moving in the right direction?
That's a tough one. Actually, I was working very closely with, as my colleague knows, with the Prime Minister of Kosovo. Kosovo's GDP is $8.6 billion. I told him, Mr. Prime Minister, why don't we double it? And of course, his other advisors thought I was crazy. I said, let's double it. Let's say in 5 years, we want it to be 16 billion. And let's work backwards, see what needs to be done. He said, it's impossible. I said, no. If Turkey can grow its economy by 43% on average over a span of 11 years, and that's a big country, why can't we do it? Of course we can do it. Because, there are examples in life of success stories which you have to benchmark against them. I mean, Turkey's economy in 2001, 2002, was $200 billion. In 2013, the GDP of Turkey was $1 trillion, 9.980 billion. That's a growth of 450% over 11 years. And that's almost 43% per year growth, assuming it's all equal. So I said, if a country of that size, 50, 60, 70 million people, growing to 80 million people, can do it, anything ever can be done. But I said there will be 3 core criteria that needs to be established. I said one is we have to believe that there is the right leadership, which is you are the Prime Minister, so I have to believe that you have the right attributes to make things happen. We just don't want to talk, we want to execute. So the first criteria really is the very strong leadership that needs to be able, competent, and capable of doing things, and deliver on the promise. And these are soft issues. We're not talking about risk, because every time we speak about anything, say, but we don't have natural resources, we don't have oil, we don't have this. I said, don't need all this. Singapore doesn't have any of that. Doesn't have any, and today is one of the biggest tigers in Asia. So I said, we have to believe that you, Mr. Ramush, you can deliver as Prime Minister. So let's go to number 2. I said, number 2, we have to do the same model like what they did in Singapore, in Dubai, and in Turkey, and many other countries. And we have to create what Mr. Muashar referred to this morning, shared value and shared prosperity. Allow every member in the society to prosper. It's not about making the rich poorer and making the poor slightly richer. It's all about elevating the entire economy. So if you make the rich richer, they will pull up with them the entire nation. So I said, let's create the environment where everybody is a shareholder and a share value contributor and absorber of this. And this means actually equal access to education, equal access to healthcare, equal access to opportunities, equal access to government support, not because if you're from a certain ethnic part of the society, you don't get any support, and if you're from, so you have to give equal access to everybody. And I said the third one, so that everybody will respect us, let's do strong governance. Rules and regulations that tie everything together and make it work. And actually he was convinced, but unfortunately, he lost the election. So let's see what happens.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to have to finish this session now because we've got some other things to get through. But I think something to say is that in all of these sessions today and tomorrow, they're very content rich. And we could continue for an hour or 2 hours. But this is the beginning of the conversation, it's not the end. So when we leave the platform, it's not the end of the conversation. What we've been doing is the beginning of the conversation. These people are here to discuss with you and to continue the conversation. We have Amdeya here that can help facilitate that conversation with you. So just think of it in that way. I wish we had more time, but I'm glad we've been able to begin the conversation at least.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.